do shit.
Reveal on sheet.
All right.
No sheet.
What are we revealing? Don't say that. It makes me nervous. Rock, paper, scissors, shit! Farts!
Hey, why aren't koalas considered bears?
Because they're marsupials.
Because they're marsupials. No, it's because they don't have the right qualification.
Finally speaking out about all the new players joining the Indiana Fever, Lexie Hull did not hold back. The team has undergone a complete transformation, and while fans are thrilled, you have to wonder how the returning players feel about it all. After all, when you bring in big-name additions like Sophie Cunningham, let's face it, it transforms everything. Natasha Howard, Dananna Bonner, and Sydney Cusson.
Players. Now we know the Indiana Fever has got quite a few, bruh. Starting with none other than Sophie Cunningham. Then we got Natasha Howard. Then they got Dananna Bonner. Then they got Sydney Clausen. And who else could come?
When Hull finally talked about it, she gave us a glimpse of what it's like inside the Fever locker room right now. For a player like Hull, who has been a part of the Fever through their rebuilding struggles, this isn't just another offseason. It's a complete turning point for the franchise. It's not just about adding talent. It's about shifting the entire identity of the team.
I mean, I'm looking one game at a time. So we're starting it off with Ryan, and it's gonna be a fun one. I mean, we battled during this W season, and she's an incredible player, an incredible one-on-one player. So got my hands full, but I'm really excited about it and excited to get out there.
It's still taking some time to realize how different everything looks every season, but this year seems really big, Hull remarked in an interview. We're just really excited.
About the Fever, you guys got some new additions. What was it like hearing the news? And I'm so excited for the Fever to come. So yeah, what is it like for you guys and for the squad looking ahead?
I mean, I think we're just so excited, and I think it's still I'm still getting used to this. Heading into my fourth year, every single season, every team, it looks so different with just the changes across the league and free agency and trades. And I mean, it's like hard to keep it all straight, but finally, like getting to our final roster and seeing what that's going to look like, I'm just excited about the leadership that's coming in and the experience that's coming in. And that's all the way from the top at our coaches, all the way down to people we got. So
when you've been with a team for a long time, you get used to playing with the same teammates, knowing their tendencies and developing chemistry. But now Hull is entering a completely different environment. And this isn't just some random roster shakeup. You can tell from the way she speaks that there's a mix of excitement and adjustment. For years, the Fever were viewed as a struggling team that was always looking for a direction. However, after Caitlin Clark's arrival, Indiana suddenly became one of the WNBA's most exciting teams. Players who have been with the team during the difficult times may find it difficult to adjust. Hull was around when Indiana was losing games, when they were being written off, when they were merely attempting to compete. Suddenly, the expectations have changed, and winning is now more important than just getting better, and that kind of change creates pressure. Hull is aware that with so many new players joining the WNBA, she must prove herself once more. This is the nature of the league. Even if you were a key player the previous season, you still need to demonstrate your worth to the team when new talent joins, and she is prepared for it. However, the most intriguing aspect, she's not only accepting the task, she's celebrating it. I believe the new leadership will have a significant impact. Hull stated that the experience and championship mentality are what we need. She is referring to players like Dananna Bonner, who has won 2 WNBA titles and played in 87 playoff games. When you add Natasha Howard, a former WNBA champion with all-star credentials, to the roster, you realize that this team isn't just young and exciting. They've proven winners in the locker room, and Hull understands how important that is because, as someone who has been on a rebuilding team, you know how frustrating it is to keep losing. Now that she has teammates who know how to get it done, and the Fever isn't just adding players, they are adding players who want to be here, which is what makes this unique. This team has carefully chosen the right players, personalities, and energy. Speaking of personalities, let's talk about Sydney Clausen officially joining the Fever because he is the only player who can provide leadership experience and pure entertainment. This isn't just a team assembling a roster and hoping for the best. If you followed Clausen during her time with the Las Vegas Aces, you already know what she brings. She has the fire, energy, and attitude that every successful team needs. And let's not forget, she is a champion. She was a member of the 2022 Las Vegas Aces team that dominated the league. She is not just a seasoned guard. She is a locker room presence. She is one of those players who doesn't always get the headlines but has a huge impact on a team's culture. Therefore, the Fever didn't waste any time in formally appointing the signing. The general manager of Fever, Amber Cox, made it apparent that there was a reason they wanted Carlson. Cox stated that Sydney, a seasoned veteran in our league, adds depth to our point guard position, which is crucial, by bringing a championship pedigree to the game. Depth with Caitlin Clark in charge, the team required a dependable veteran to support her, someone who could take over as offensive leader and add that defensive vigor. Carlson is ideal for that position, and let's face it, her influence extends beyond the stat sheet. She is the type of player who consistently brings energy to practice, whether it be on the bench or in the locker room. She keeps everyone focused and involved, which is crucial when attempting to create a winning culture. Now for the really intriguing part. Since let's be honest, before Caitlin Clark arrived, would Sydney Carlson have signed here? Would Dananna Boner have left her fiancé to play in Indiana? Would Sophie Cunningham and Natasha Howard have jumped on board? Probably not. This is the Caitlin Clark effect, which is what happens when a generational talent lands in your city. Carlson joining the Fever isn't just about basketball, it's about what Indiana is becoming. With all of these extras, the pressure is definitely on because there are no more excuses. Players want to be a part of it. They want to be a part of something extraordinary, and that is precisely what the Fever is building right now. The Fever were young, learning, and developing last season. Now that they have veteran leadership and experience, they will not be content with just making the playoffs. Instead, they are thinking bigger, which means that players like Lexie Hull must step up. She is no longer a young player trying to prove herself. Instead, she is a part of a team that has real expectations, and she knows it. For this reason, her response was so measured and focused. She isn't overwhelmed by the new signings. Rather, she is inspired by them, which is exactly what the Fever need. As in a league as competitive as the WNBA, you need players who are hungry, willing to adapt, and prepared to go above and beyond to win. With Natasha Howard adding depth and Dananna Boner joining the mix, along with Lexie Hull, who is prepared, this team is looking dangerous. However, the real test will begin when the games start because, believe me, this season will be an absolute must-watch basketball game. Building a super team on paper is one thing, but making it work on the court is a completely different challenge. With a completely redesigned roster and significant expectations on their shoulders, the Indiana Fever are not just embracing the changes. Rather, Lexie Hull is speaking out about them. The truth is that this isn't just another rebuild. The team is making the kind of power moves that signal a shift in the WNBA's hierarchy, and not everyone is happy about it. For years, the Indiana Fever were at the bottom, constantly looking for an identity. They had talented young players, but they lacked the experience and leadership to take that next step. Then Caitlin Clark's arrival abruptly changed everything. The team was no longer merely trying to stay competitive. Instead, they were now a destination. And when players like Dananna Boner and Natasha Howard, now that Sydney Carlson and Sophie Cunningham have begun signing on, the message is clear. This is not the same Indiana Fever, and Hull, who has been there through the difficult times, has a unique perspective on this transformation. She is eager about the changes and recognizes the value of bringing in veteran leadership, but she also knows that this new roster comes with pressure, and she is prepared for it. I believe the leadership that is entering will have a significant impact. Let's face it, last season Indiana lacked that championship mindset. They had potential and promising players, but they lacked the edge and knowledge of what it really takes to win at the highest level. Now that they have players like Boner and Howard, both WNBA champions, they finally have that, and Hull knows how valuable that experience will be for her and the entire team. However, despite all the excitement, there's another layer to this fight for minutes. The WNBA is a competitive league, And when you add so much talent to a roster, it means somebody's playing time is going to be affected for Hull. That means she has to prove herself all over again. She's no longer just competing against a young roster for a bigger role. She's now sharing the court with some of the best players in the league. That can be intimidating for some players. But for Hull, it's just more motivation. She's been in the league long enough to know that you earn your minutes. And if she wants to be a key part of this Fever team, she has to show that she belongs in the rotation. Even with all these new additions, that's why her reaction to the roster moves was so interesting. Instead of worrying about how the changes might affect her, she's focused on what they bring to the team. That kind of mindset is what separates good players from great ones. And speaking of great players, we have to talk about Sydney Colson officially signing with the Fever, because while Boner and Howard have grabbed the biggest headlines, Colson might be one of the most underrated pickups of the offseason. Sydney Colson is a culture icon in addition to being a seasoned guard. As a champion who is a member of the Las Vegas Aces 2022 championship team, Setter is the kind of player that every championship team needs. Although she may not always be a standout player on the stat sheet, her leadership, defense, and energy make a significant impact both on and off the court. Because of this, the Fever front office moved swiftly to see her. When you look at what the Fever are doing, it's evident that they're building this team with a very specific blueprint in mind. They're not just signing the biggest names available, they're signing players who fit a championship mindset, which is why Sydney Colson's arrival is so valuable. It's not just about adding another backup point guard to the roster, it's about adding another winner to the roster. It's not just about Colson coming in and taking minutes away from someone else. It's about Colson helping to create a winning culture. In a league like the WNBA, where the difference between winning and losing is so narrow, those players are invaluable. But let's face it, this wouldn't have happened without Caitlin Clark. She's a defensive asset, a veteran presence, and someone who has been there before, which is exactly what Caitlin Clark and the younger players need. Clark hasn't even played a single WNBA game yet, and already she's making an unbelievable impact on the Fever's ability to attract talent. With Sydney Colson have signed here last year, with Deanna Boner have left her fiancé to come to Indiana, would Natasha Howard and Sophie Cunningham have jumped on board? Probably not. This is the Caitlin Clark effect. This is what happens when you have a player who changes the trajectory of a franchise. And now the Fever aren't just rebuilding, they're making a serious push to be contenders. This isn't just about making the playoffs, this is about making a statement. Indiana isn't satisfied with just improving anymore, they're building a team that can compete with the best in the WNBA, and that's why this season is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen before, because now the Fever aren't just the Caitlin Clark show, they're a complete team with veterans, leaders, and players who know how to win, and that changes everything. So now the question is, can they put it all together? Because talent isn't enough, super teams don't always work, chemistry takes time, roles need to be figured out. But if they get it right, if all of these pieces come together the way they're supposed to, then the Indiana Fever aren't just a playoff team, they're a legitimate championship threat. And that is something that no one saw coming a year ago. The WNBA has never had a shakeup quite like this. And with the Fever stacking their roster with winners, veterans, and experienced leaders, the rest of the league better be ready, because Indiana is coming and they're coming fast. So what do you think? Did the Indiana Fever make the right moves with Sydney Colson? What are your thoughts on Sophie Cunningham, Deanna Boner, and Lexie Hull's response to all the changes? If you liked this breakdown, please leave a comment below. Subscribe to the channel and enable notifications so that you don't miss any updates on the NBA's biggest moves this season. We'll be here to cover it all. Click on the next video to continue watching, and we'll see you next time.